My first glimpse at the cultural defining power of a well-told story took place in an Asian studies class at high school. During one particular afternoon, we were learning about the Austronesian expansion that took place around 3000 BC. These were the people who left the Asian mainland and headed for the vast island networks further south. They had set out on their adventures in the first ever catamarans and outrigger boats, covered in tattoos and carrying statues carved from jade. At the time, many of the islands they reached were thriving with dense forest cover and rich ecosystems that included giant turtles, birds and fish. But the new arrivals brought with them a mindset fit for a large, expansive mainland. By overfishing and overhunting, plus felling excess trees for crops, the tattooed explorers very quickly knocked their new ecosystems out of balance. And many of the nascent societies collapsed, and some islands were completely abandoned. However, as the next wave of catamarans and outriggers arrived, the people came to understand that their survival depended on the deep respect for the local ecology. They replaced domination with integration, treated nature as a gift that couldn't be abused, and saw themselves as a keystone species that could work with the surrounds to create even more abundance. Now, what was imprinted on my adolescent brain was that they understood the importance of embedding this new wisdom into their culture. And they did this by telling new stories and cultivating myths and metaphors. They integrated a new ontology or way of existing that would shape the behaviours of future generations. To this day, many of these islands have sustained their ecosystems. For much of our existence, humans held animist beliefs in some form, a belief that a current of life runs through and connects all things, including trees, animals and rocks. Even today, the Achua people living on the border of Peru and Ecuador don't even have a word for nature. They don't think it exists. They see absolutely no separation between themselves and their surrounds. With the spread of Christianity and then the scientific revolution in the late 16th century, these animist beliefs were largely eradicated, and a new story of nature was written, a story which saw humans as separate and superior to the living world. We must hound nature and put her in constraints, said Francis Bacon, the father of modern science. We must enter and penetrate her every hole and corner. Sadly, this is a story that still pervades our culture today. The dominant narratives in our society, the myths and metaphors that are being cultivated, are not being done by wise elders or experienced adventurers, but by advertising agencies on behalf of monolithic corporate entities. Our information ecology has become heavily polluted, and this is having deleterious impacts on our own health and the health of the planet. So if we are to prevent the collapse of our own island, our beautiful island planet in the galaxy, then we need to tell better stories, to embed wisdom into those stories, and to cultivate a respect and reverence for nature once again. Our storytelling today falls predominantly into two categories. The first is analogous to a magician's trick. Our mainstream blockbuster narratives are the clicking finger, which draws the eye away from the reality of what's coming next. And while it's important that we shine a light on the extractive industries who fund extensive denial campaigns, our media and advertising networks receive minimal flack for their continued perpetuation of a more subtle form of denial. On social media, the doctoring of our stories for outrage and emotional hijack also blinds us to the fact that we are inhabiting a dying world. The second category of storytelling comes with the best of intentions. For the past few decades, we've used alarming narratives. Countless films and books, many with precise poetic detail, purvey the destruction of our natural world. But at what cost? Recent neurological research shows that constant viewing of information laced with fear or overwhelm and anxiety can cause paralysis in many people. Shutting down the part of our brain is crucial for problem solving and creative thinking. So what world could we build together then, if we incentivised and funded better stories? Meaningful stories about our interconnected relationship with the living world, or empowering stories about individuals or communities who are restoring entire ecosystems. Stories of regeneration. For too long, we've assaulted people with a barrage of graphs, data and lifeless statistics. But a new approach is required, an old approach that involves telling better stories aimed directly at the heart. Which means that the role of the storyteller has never been more important. The real purpose of the artist, the poet, the songwriter, the author, or the filmmaker is to create and shape culture. That culture then determines what survives or dies. So in this moment, we need a revived culture with a radical empathy for the living world. And if our storytellers can't find the way, then the way cannot be found.